Buenas noches, and welcome to the City of the Angels. It's great to host the NALEO conference here for the first time in 13 years. We're looking forward to you coming back before another 13, but it's great to be here. I welcome you at a time in our city and across the nation when many people all across the nation are struggling to make ends meet, foreclosures at a historic high, unemployment rate at levels that we haven't seen since the 1980s, and approaching even the Depression. And in our own community, all of what we see in the country today is even more severe. When it comes to the unemployment rate here in LA, it's about 12.5%. For Latinos, it's almost 15%. The foreclosure rate, 21,000 families have lost their homes. Disproportionately, they're Latino. When you look at the dropout rate in America today, you know that Latinos have the highest dropout rate, the lowest rate of matriculation in institutions of higher learning. And so we come to the NALEO conference understanding that our work is still not done. We acknowledge that we've elected a president named Barack Obama, first African American in our history. We're about to see on the court of the highest court of the land, soon to be Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor, and despite these successes and the progress that we've been able to enjoy, the many elected officials who are here today, we have much work to do. It is time, particularly, I believe, for us to engage in the battle, the civil rights battle in our schools. And I wanted to talk, well, thank you. I wanted to talk just a moment about it. You know that in New York and Chicago and Philadelphia and Boston and in Washington, D.C. and here, mayors have tried to take over the school districts. And they have because for too long, people have been pointing fingers and saying it's somebody else's problem. And I'm here today to ask all of you to get behind the new civil rights struggle of our time. And that's the struggle to make sure that our kids are getting the best education in America. Just for a moment to chronicle what's going on in our city. 50% dropout rate. In many schools on the east side, on the south side, where Latinos are disproportionately, that number is closer to 60%. 80% of these kids are scoring at the bottom 20 percentile. I was introduced as the first, and one of the things I always say wherever I go is that the role of the first is to open up the door for the rest. And when people ask me how I got here, I always say, I can read and write. And too many of our kids today in public schools in Los Angeles, in Houston, in Denver, in Chicago, in New York, in Miami, can't read and write. And so when I say it's the civil rights issue of our time, there may not be a National Guard blocking the schoolhouse door, but the lack of success is as insidious as it was before Brown versus Education when you see so few of our kids graduating and going on to institutions of higher learning. And I think it's incumbent upon us, the generation of Latino electeds who represent the first or the second. And it's incumbent on us to begin to challenge the status quo. In our own city, in my city, today, you have folks who defend the status quo and say, well, Señor Villaraigosa, what you don't understand is that these kids aren't learning because we have the highest rate of English language learners anywhere in the country. They say their parents have a second-grade education. They say that we have the highest number of kids in foster homes than any school district in the nation. More kids on the school lunch program. Less middle-class kids of any school district. Let me ask you, the first and second generation to have gone on to universities, how many of you were English language learners? How many of you grew up in foster homes or broken homes? How many of you are the first to graduate? The fact of the matter is, those are excuses, and our kids can learn. And we've got to begin to challenge the status quo and those who will defend it, even if they are from unions who historically have been part of a progressive coalition. You know, when the teachers union says it's okay to defend a seniority system that gets rid of all of the new teachers, kids disproportionately, teachers of color, Latinos and African Americans, who have come back to their communities because they want to make change and they want to change the paradigm. There's something wrong. When senior teachers say, I'm not going into a low-performing school or a poor area of the city because I'm senior and I don't have to, there's something wrong with the system. When teachers can put their hands on kids time and again, and nobody challenges that system, and nobody questions why we can't have some kind of accountability with respect to that, then I think it's time for a change. And I'm here today to say to every one of you, if you want NALEO to be able one day to fill up the LA Convention Center or the Chicago Convention Center or the San Francisco Convention Center, if you want that day to come, then you better get behind the struggle to reform our schools. You better get behind the challenge in America today that says we demand accountability. We demand that our kids get the best education that America can afford. And I'm not just singling out the teachers union, but they are part of the problem. I'm singling out the status quo as well. President Obama has talked about charter schools, and we've got to get behind those charter schools. He's talked about the need to experiment and try new things, to have accountability and measurement and metrics, and we've got to get behind those kinds of accountability measures that begin to demand success in our schools, that track the dropout rate, that figure out why kids are dropping out so we can develop strategies to keep them in, that begin to support the idea that small schools are schools that are successful, that schools that have accountability with parents and teachers involved can make a difference. And so I wanted to come today not just to acknowledge my friends in the legislature, because as you know, or at least some of you may know, I used to be a member of the legislature. I had a little job called the speakership of the California State Assembly. And I can tell you that we are very, very fortunate to have here in California one of the most progressive legislatures anywhere in the nation. When you look at healthcare reform, when you look at climate change issues, when you look at many of the issues